Hey all, in this video I'm going to be doing something a bit different. Instead of regular transport spotting, in this video we are going to look at which tram route is often delayed, runs in a straight line, intercepts 13 other tram lines and is often packed. Well, that of course is Melbourne's one-of-a-kind Route 78 tram. The Route 78 tram is quite possibly the most unique tram route in Melbourne. The route is run by A-class trams from Kew Depot and is 6.5 kilometres in length. It runs in almost a perfectly straight line from North Richmond to Balaclava via Church Street and Chapel Street. Along the way, it runs through the suburbs of Richmond, South Yarra, Prahran, Windsor, St Kilda East and St Kilda. It is often slow and delayed by traffic, has direct connections to 13 other tram lines, only runs along one road, and it even had W-class trams operating on it until 2014. While Route 78 may look basic and boring on a map, there is quite a bit of interesting history and some unique and fun facts about the route. Before getting into the current route, let's go over some history about how the 78 came to be as it is today. Originally, a cable car service began in 1888 that started at Brighton Road, which is the current Balaclava terminus, and then ran up to Toorak Road, where it then turned left into Toorak Road and continued into the city. The cable car was converted to electric overhead wires between 1924 and 1926 and also included a new segment of track further up Chapel Street and then eventually onto Church Street to North Richmond. This extension of track to North Richmond obviously played a big part in what formed the current path of the Route 78 that we know today. Interestingly though, from 1926 to 1934, Route 78 did not actually operate just quite yet. During this period, it actually ran as two different routes. The first one was the Route 77 from Balaclava, which back then was considered to be Prahran terminus, up to Chapel Street and Church Street to Swan Street, where it turned left and eventually terminated at Batman Avenue. Route 77 was eventually deleted in 1986 due to low patronage. The second variation was the Route 79, which ran from North Richmond to St Kilda, which ran down Church Street and Chapel Street, and turned off into Carlisle Street to St Kilda. This variation was deleted more recently in 2014. Even though Route 77 and 79 no longer exist, they did form the Route 78, which began service in 1934. In 1934, the Route 78 began service, running from North Richmond to what was considered to be Prahran via Church Street and Chapel Street. The Route 78, along with the 77 and 79, was operated by Hawthorn Depot until 1965, when operation was transferred to Kew Depot due to the closure of Hawthorn Depot. In 1972, the route became shared between Glen Huntly and Kew depots. From 1972 until 1995, the route was essentially untouched with the exception of the Route 77 variation being discontinued in 1986, as mentioned earlier. In 1995, however, some major changes occurred. The first was changes that Kew Depot ceased to operate the route, and the 78, along with the 79, was operated by just Glen Huntly Depot. At the same time, Route 78 actually began to have reduced operating hours, with those hours being swapped for extra operating hours on the Route 79 variant. From this time until 2009, Route 78 only ran until 6 o'clock on weekdays, and on Saturdays it only ran until 1 o'clock, with no Sunday service at all, just like your typical bus routes. Route 79 ran at the other times, only running after 6 o'clock on weekdays, after 1 o'clock on Saturdays, and all day on Sundays. However, the Route 79 turned off at Chapel Street into Carlisle Street to head towards St Kilda, meaning that when the 78 was not operating, the section of Chapel Street between Brighton Road and Carlisle Street had no trams running. W-class trams also ceased to run on the route in the late 1990s and were replaced with Z and A-class trams. However, in 2004, the W-class trams received brake upgrades and were reinstated to run alongside the Z and A-class trams. In 2009, the operating hours of Route 78 and 79 altered to have Route 78 operate until 6 o'clock and Route 79 to operate after 6 o'clock, 7 days a week. The 78 and 79 were the final routes, along with routes 30 and 35, to have W-class trams operating on them. W-class trams, however, were withdrawn again in 2014 due to them being speed limited to 30 km an hour and thus left the 35 city circle as the final route to be operated with W-class trains. Another change that occurred in 2014 is that the Paran terminus was renamed to Balaclava, which does make sense as the terminus was well past the suburb of Paran. Although ironically, the southern terminus is not in Balaclava either, and is in fact in St Kilda. The most recent major change occurred in 2017 when 100 Depot ceased to operate the route and was transferred back to Q Depot along with all A-class trams that were based at 100 Depot. This meant that Z-class trams ceased to operate on Route 78. On a side note, the A-class trams being transferred to Q Depot is why you no longer see any A-class trams operating on routes 3, 64 and 67. This is how the current Route 78 came to be, but there's more to it than just its history. The first thing that you'll notice when you look at the 78 on the tram network map is that it is a straight line. While it isn't perfectly straight in real life, when you ride the 78 it is pretty close to it. The almost perfect straightness of the route is the only one of its kind in Melbourne, although people seem to forget that the 19 isn't that far off either. However, it seemed that it wasn't always easy to put a straight line on a map, as on the 2017 map, the Route 78 appeared to have a massive bend on Chapel Street between the Yarra River and Commercial Road. You would also quickly notice that the 78 does not pass through the CBD at any point. It is only one of two tram routes in Melbourne, with the other being the 82 from Footscray to Moonee Ponds that do not pass through the CBD. As a non-CBD route, you can expect it to be different in more ways than the CBD routes. The 78, along with the 82, do not operate all night on New Year's Eve or day, unlike all other tram routes which do. This is because they do not help with getting the big crowds of people to and from the city on New Year's Eve and day. Another unique and interesting fact about the 78 is that it is the only tram route in Melbourne that does not have a single accessible stop. Additionally, it is also the only route that does not overlap with any other routes. Now, it might seem like that an infrequent tram line that just runs in a straight line and does not pass through the CBD wouldn't get much patronage, and that a bus service would probably suit the area better. But this isn't true, and I'll get to that. As mentioned earlier, 13 of Melbourne's 23 tram routes have a direct connection to the 78. The 78, intercepting more than half of all other Melbourne's tram routes, is where it gets most of its usage by transporting passengers between these routes. Now that you know about the history and some fun facts about Route 78, let's get into its geography. Starting at the North Richmond terminus, the line is a single track with a double curve into Victoria Street heading eastbound. This curve is to allow trams to access Q Depot. As seen here, the stop is a safety zone. This is the only safety zone stop on the route, with all other stops being curbside stops. This has honestly got to be the most dangerous tram stop on the entire network. Vehicles often drive on the track, getting dangerously close to where passengers stand waiting for the tram. The Northern Terminus also has connections to routes 12 and 109. If you're interested in learning more about Route 12, Techies Transport has a fantastic video detailing the route. Anyways, moving on. Just after leaving North Richmond Terminus, the line becomes double track, and then immediately we come to the next stop at Baker Street. The distance from Victoria Street is only 150 metres, making it one of the shortest distances between tram stops on the network, and this happens several times along the route. Shortly after, we arrive at Bridge Road, where passengers can change routes 48 and 75. This is a simple intersection with no curves. Following this, Route 78 climbs up a hill and then passes the highest point on the route as it passes by St Ignatius Church before descending back down as it approaches Swan Street. At Swan Street, Route 78 intercepts its fifth of 13 routes where passengers can change for Route 70 services. At the intersection of Church Street and Swan Street, there is a curve on the southwest corner that was used by the Route 77 tram. This curve is now pretty much redundant, however, this will be important for later. Immediately following Swan Street, the very next stop is the often forgotten East Richmond Railway Station. This stop is very close to Swan Street, so that you can get off at Swan Street and run to this stop and get back on the tram, providing that someone is already at the stop to stop the tram. The stop is quite easy to miss if you're not looking out for it. This is also one of a handful of tram stops that are located directly on a bridge. It is also worth noting that this stop is only one way, so you can only catch a tram towards Balaclava and not to North Richmond. There is also a turnback point allowing Route 78 trams to terminate early if needed, however this is very rare. A little while later, Route 78 crosses over the Yarra River and Church Street changes name to Chapel Street. The route also now enters the suburb of South Yarra. A little while later, as Route 78 begins to pass through the heart of South Yarra, we arrive at Toorak Road. Toorak Road is roughly at the halfway point on the route. Here passengers can change for Route 58 as well as the nearby South Yarra railway station. There is a turnback point here allowing trams to terminate early. However, just like the one at East Richmond Station is very rarely used. There are no curves at the intersection of Toorak Road, so trams can only go straight. As we continue to head south towards Balaclava, the next route that the 78 intercepts is Route 72 at Commercial Road. This is another intersection with no curves. After crossing Commercial Road, Route 78 enters Paran. The 8th route that the 78 intercepts is Route 6. Like the Commercial Road, there is nothing really special at this intersection. At Duke Street, there is a bottleneck and the curbside stop is very close to the tram. Here, vehicles are forced to drive behind the trams due to the extended footpaths taking up one lane in each direction. Next, Route 78 passes over the Sandringham line at Windsor Station. Similar to at East Richmond Station, the tram stop towards North Richmond here is located on the bridge. Just before entering St Kilda East, Route 78 crosses routes 5 and 64 at Dandenong Road. The stop towards Balaclava has a rather interesting location, being wedged between the main part of the road and the slip lane. After crossing Dandenong Road, there is another rarely used turnback point. As we near the Balaclava terminus, Route 78 crosses Carlisle Street and routes 3 and 16. Here, there is a curve on the northwest corner of the intersection that was commonly used by Route 79 trams heading to St Kilda, but this has become irrelevant since the removal of the 79. Interestingly, the stop announcement for this stop has not been updated and still announces
stopping at Carlisle Street. Stop 37. Change here from Route 3, 3A, 16 and Balaclava Station.
Finally, we arrive at the southern terminus of Route 78 at the Nepean Highway, where passengers can change for Route 67. As mentioned earlier, this stop is actually in St Kilda and not Balaclava. There is a turnback point here, as well as a curve into the Nepean Highway that was used by trams accessing Munhuntley Depot prior to 2017. Like the North Richmond terminus, this stop is also quite dangerous, but in a different way. As seen here, there is very little room between the turnback point and the traffic lights, but the main problem with this stop is that the trams sit in the middle of the road, causing a bottleneck for traffic, and if drivers are not paying attention, they can easily slam into the back of a tram. Interestingly, the sign at the terminus still says Paran. So as we reach the end of the route, you might think this video ends here, but this is where you are wrong. How could Route 78 be improved? Is there more potential to the route than what it currently is? Well, we are going to take a look at that now. Currently, the 78 terminates at North Richmond. This means that passengers have to change Route 12 and Route 109 to continue into the city. However, Route 78 could be extended into the city from here, and this is where Route 12 comes in. In an article published by Melbourne on Transit, they suggest that Route 12 should be rerouted to run via Latrobe Street instead of Collins Street. If this was to happen, this would provide a continuous tram service along Spencer Street as well as a more legitimate tram service on Latrobe Street. However, this would mean that Route 30 would be discontinued, so you will not be able to catch a tram from St Vincent's Plaza directly to Central Pier. In addition to Route 12 taking over Latrobe Street from Route 30, it would also mean that there will no longer be low-floor tram services along Latrobe Street. This means that the plan to upgrade Latrobe Street tram stops to be accessible would be pointless. However, at the same time, Victoria Street could use an extra tram route. The simplest solution here would be to extend the 78 from North Richmond into the city and terminate at Central Pier. To do this, a new curve would be built from Church Street to head westbound into Victoria Street, as well as upgrading the current North Richmond terminus to double track. After this, Route 78 would run along Victoria Street to St Vincent's Plaza, and then along Latrobe Street, overlapping the entirety of Route 30 to Central Pier. Just like if Route 12 was to be rerouted onto Latrobe Street, this means that Route 30 would be discontinued. But who said only one of these proposals should be done? By rerouting Route 12 onto Latrobe Street and extending Route 78 to Central Pier, this would give two legitimate tram services to Latrobe Street, and Route 30 would be decommissioned. This means that a continuous service along Latrobe Street would be retained while also adding a continuous service along Spencer Street. Additionally, to top it off, Route 30 being discontinued would allow Southbank Depot to reassign the E-classes from Route 30 onto Route 78. This would mean that Route 78 would be shared between Southbank and Q depots, but more importantly, E-class trams would run on Route 78 to provide a much higher capacity tram service along Church Street and Chapel Street, as currently the A-classes can get very packed. This is ideally a good solution to providing legitimate Latrobe Street services and solving overcrowding problems on Route 78 at minimum cost. If this ever happens, it would also be good to upgrade some tram stops along Church Street and Chapel Street to be accessible for E-class trams running here. Now, earlier I said that the redundant curve at Swan Street would be important for later. If this 78 extension was to happen, this curve would be used for diversions to Central Pier in case of disruptions. Now obviously, Chapel Street is a lot more packed on Friday and Saturday nights compared to the rest of the week. So this means that there will not be much of a need to run the 78 into the city during the evening on these other days. Similar to how Route 64 currently only runs between Dandenong Road and East Brighton after 6:30, the extended 78 will also do this, except for Friday and Saturday, where it would run the full route until the last service. The 78A shuttle would be Balaclava to North Richmond, the current route. So now that I've talked about extending the 78 from the northern terminus, what about the southern end? The Balaclava terminus, as already mentioned, is not great. Fixing this, however, is relatively easy. There is already a curve from Chapel Street into the Nepean Highway where there is a Route 67 tram stop with a turnback point. Similar to Route 12 at Victoria Gardens, the only issue with this is that a new head shunt will need to be constructed so that terminating Route 78 trams don't block the line for Route 67 trams. So there you have it. That's the history, geographic features, fun facts and upgrade ideas to the Route 78 tram. Thanks for watching.